Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS. We got 8 bowl games on Saturday. I'm actually recording this on Friday morning around 11 a.m. Eastern time, so I don't know how I did on Friday yet. I have a bunch of bets open too, so we'll see. Hopefully by the time you're watching this, I had a good Friday. As a whole, the last couple weeks, man, every single time I have a winning day and I think I'm getting back on track, followed up with laying an egg. The Seahawks minus 3.5, Seahawks team total over last night. The Bulls plus 6.5. They had a 17-point lead with 6 minutes left and didn't cover plus 6.5. Just crushed me last night. December has not been my month, man. In fact, I really haven't been feeling it since like October now. So hopefully that turns around. And actually, a little bit of optimism here. I was looking at last year. I actually had a shitty December last year as well. And then January, February, March were kind to me. So hopefully we're on the same trajectory here. But yeah, obviously there's 8 bowl games. There's 3 NFL games. I'm not going to go into full detail for all 8 games, but I will briefly go through them. 8 games, Saturday, December 28th. Let's do it. Welcome to the SWUS. Hey, get the sauce. First up, we got UCONN, my alma mater. UCONN, University of Connecticut against North Carolina. What the hell bowl is this? This is, it's at Fenway. This is the Wasabi Fenway Bowl. UNC against UCONN. North Carolina's laying 2.5. Total sitting at 52.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts. And according to the data, action's coming in on the UNC side. Over 65% of the tickets, over 65% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the UConn offense against the North Carolina defense. Obviously, North Carolina has the edge. North Carolina's going to have the edge on both sides of the ball. They play in the ACC. UConn plays a much less, is an independent, but plays a much lesser schedule. On the season, UConn's 78th in yards per play, 92nd in success rate. North Carolina defensively, 71st and 53rd. I will say, though, UConn finished out the season running the ball extremely well. In their last 4 games, they averaged over 210 rushing yards per game, 6.1 yards per carry, 47.1% success rate per rush. So they were running the ball successfully to finish out the year. That being said, if you look at the opponents, I mean, you got Georgia State, you got UAB. Syracuse is a respectable opponent, and UMass. So as a whole, not the toughest opponents there, but UConn has been running the ball. And what I like here for UConn is we do have a data point of UConn playing a defense that's actually better than North Carolina. Week 3, UConn went on the road to Duke, and I'm not going to say they ran the ball on Duke, but they did average 4.84 yards per carry, 179 rushing yards, just 36.1% success rate per rush. So that indicates that the overall rushing performance wasn't quite as good as the numbers indicate. But UConn went on the road to Duke, who is a better defensive front than North Carolina, and was able to run the ball. So maybe UConn's able to run the ball on UNC here. Keep in mind, this North Carolina defense is missing pieces. In fact, they're missing 3 starters from the front 7, a linebacker, a defensive tackle, and the defensive end. So 3 starters, 3 of their most important defensive pieces here in terms of stopping the run out. So honestly, maybe Connecticut is able to run the ball on North Carolina. Honestly, what worries me a little bit is I'm reading that there's a chance the right and left tackles aren't going to play for UConn. The Action Network article has them listed as possible opt-outs. Tried to look into it, couldn't find any information. So I don't know if the offensive tackles are playing for UConn. Obviously, that's huge if UConn's going to be without both offensive tackles. If both of those guys play, though, I would think UConn is able to run the ball in North Carolina a little bit. It's not like UNC's defense is anything scary. I think UConn might be able to run the ball a little bit in this game. Now, what I don't like for UConn here is they don't have a mobile quarterback, whether it's Nick Evers, whether it's, damn it, I forgot the other quarterback's name, but they have 2 quarterbacks that switch on and off. We don't know who's starting in this one. Neither of them are particularly mobile, and the reason I'm bringing that up is North Carolina's defense has shown us that you can cook them with a mobile quarterback. In their games against mobile quarterbacks this year, they allowed over 271 rushing yards per game. 6.12 yards per carry. So it's looking like North Carolina's defense definitely struggles against mobile quarterbacks. In their other 9 games, they only allowed 3 yards per carry. So just when I thought, hey, UConn can run the ball in North Carolina, now it's looking like they might not be able to because they don't have a quarterback that fits that description. And Connecticut really hasn't had much of a passing attack this entire season. On the last 7 games, they're averaging 5.63 yards per pass attempt, 39.3% success rate per dropback. This isn't a great passing attack. So even though this North Carolina defense has been extremely extremely vulnerable to the pass. We've seen them get cooked through the air several times this year. I don't know if UConn's the offense I necessarily think can exploit that. So as a whole on this side of the ball, maybe UConn can run the ball a little bit. Maybe they could complete some passes. It's tough. It's a tough call. With North Carolina missing those three main pieces, I would have to think, hey, this might be a sneaky spot for UConn to move the ball a little bit. Now, what about the matchup on the other side of the ball? And this is interesting because the UConn defense is pretty fucking nice. On the season, they're 38th in yards per play, 38th in success rate, great against the run, great against the pass. Now, to be fair, they obviously play a much, much easier schedule than North Carolina does, and it's not even close. UConn plays a pretty easy schedule, but this defense is real. This Connecticut Huskies defense is real. North Carolina's offense on the season, 49th in yards per play, 70th in success rate. Obviously, this is an offense that wanted to run the ball for most of the season. We did see Criswell have a couple of really nice games, though, and we'll talk about that in a second. He might need to have one of those nice games in this one because Omarion Hampton is out, starting left tackle is out, and maybe their guard who won the ACC award for the best blocker in the conference, the guard, Lampkin, he might be out as well. So North Carolina is going to be missing their superstar NFL running back, an NFL left tackle, and maybe an NFL guard. So key pieces might be out here for North Carolina. Against a really good, really undervalued UConn run defense, missing those pieces, North Carolina may not be able to run the ball in this game. Now, that being said, UConn has shown us this year that you can really throw the ball on them. Their numbers on the year looks like they have great pass defense. If you look at their full season numbers, they're great against the pass. Not exactly true. They've played 2 games this season against offenses that rank in the top 70, not top 10, in the top 70, Syracuse and Maryland. In those 2 games, they allowed 40.5 points per game, over 7.3 yards per play, specifically through the air. They allowed over 425 passing yards per game in those 2, 10.1 yards per attempt. Now, Syracuse and Maryland, both better passing attacks than North Carolina. North Carolina's been an offense that's more centered around running the ball. That being said, we have seen Criswell exploit some bad defenses this year. They've played 3 games this year against defenses outside of the top 50. In those 3 games, they averaged 35.7 points per game, almost 6 yards per play, 45.8% success rate. Look at the passing numbers. Now, it's important to point out that they were able to run the ball extremely successfully as well. So the run game was there. But look at the passing numbers. 212 passing yards per game, 9.4 yards per attempt, 48% success rate per dropback. So Criswell had no problems throwing the ball in these bad defenses. UConn's pass defense is definitely not great. And on top of that, UConn's missing some key pieces on the defensive side of the ball. Their edge rusher, Hardy, is out, and also they're missing their best corner. So UConn missing 2 pieces specifically that are out there to stop the pass. So Criswell's going to have opportunities to make throws in this game. Betting it, in my opinion, comes down to what you think of Criswell. If you think he's going to cook on UConn, then probably lay the 2.5 with North Carolina. But he's not going to have run support, which obviously makes his job a lot harder. Personally, I'll probably throw a few dollars on UConn. Like I said, it's my alma mater. I got kicked out early on. I was only there for 6 weeks or something, but I did go there. I love Stores. So give me UConn plus 2.5. Probably just doing a little bit of gambling here. Next game, Boston College, Nebraska. What bowl is this? Boston College, Nebraska. This is the Pinstripe Bowl. This one's at Yankee Stadium. All right, so Boston College, Nebraska. What line we got here? Nebraska's laying 4. Total sitting at 46.5 or 46, depending on your sports book. Let's take a look at the pie charts. And according to the data, first of all, you can see the line's been moving to Nebraska. On Monday morning, it was 2.5. Now it's 4. As far as the action, according to this data, it's coming in pretty even. About 55% of the tickets coming in on Nebraska, over 60% of the money. So slightly coming in on Nebraska, but not really overwhelming. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's talk about this matchup, and we're talking about Boston College offense against the Nebraska defense. Pretty evenly matched. Edge goes to Nebraska a bit. Boston College offensively 100th in yards per play, 84th in success rate. The thing with Boston College offense is you have to split their season into 2 chunks, the Castellanos games and the post-Castellanos games, because Boston College offense actually looked a little bit better with Grayson James at quarterback. So these numbers might not be the best representation of what Boston College offense is right now. This Nebraska defense is going to be missing 2 key pieces here, a linebacker and a defensive end. And when it comes to trying to determine what kind of rushing production we can expect out of Boston College here, good luck. with these data points. Look at the Nebraska. This is Nebraska's numbers against the run. Against Ohio State and Iowa, two of the most dangerous rushing attacks in the country, Nebraska shut shit down. They held them to 56.5 rushing yards per game, 1.98 yards per carry, success rate under 32%. Elite defense against the run against Ohio State and Iowa. But look at the left side of this graphic. Against Indiana, USC, and Wisconsin, they allowed 5.9 yards per carry, 172 rushing yards per game. Make it make sense. Nebraska gets cooked on the ground by USC and Wisconsin, but completely shuts down Ohio State and Iowa on the ground. Yeah, good luck trying to predict what kind of rushing production we're going to see from Boston College here. I will say Boston College rushing attacks seem to look better with Grayson James at quarterback, which is kind of crazy because Castellanos is the scrambler. He's the athlete. They brought in Grayson James, who's more of a pocket passer, but after they made the quarterback switch, the run game looked better. In Boston College last 4 games, the games that Grayson James started, they were averaging over 4.7 yards per carry, 47.7% success rate per rush, over 214 rushing yards per game. So the Boston College run game looked better with Grayson James at quarterback. And speaking of Grayson James, this Nebraska secondary is definitely vulnerable. Yeah, they shut down the Iowa passing attack. Who hasn't shut down the Iowa passing attack? In their last 5 games before the Iowa game, they were allowing 9.8 yards per attempt, 55.3% success rate per dropback, over 254 passing yards per game. So I think Grayson James is going to be able to make throws in this one as well. Overall, I think it's a pretty solid matchup for Boston College offensively. Are they going to run the ball? Tough to say, because we've seen Nebraska's run defense look like the best in the country, and we've seen it look pretty bad as well. So a lot of variance there on whether or not Boston College is going to run the ball. But as a whole, I think it's a pretty decent matchup for the Boston College offense. On the other side, we got the Nebraska offense against the Boston College defense, and honestly, I really don't know what to say on this side. I mean, Boston College defense, 65th in yards per play allowed, 58th in success rate, great numbers against the run, so looking pretty solid here on the left side of this graphic. Nebraska's offense has been all over the place. On the season, they're 105th in yards per play, 46th in success rate. Now, the Boston College defense, we'll get to the Nebraska offense in a second. Want to point out that the Boston College defense coming off back-to-back elite defensive performances. In the last 2 games of the season, they played North Carolina and Pittsburgh. In those 2 games, they held opponents to 22 points per game, just 4.2 yards per play. Success rate at 34.5%. So Boston College finished off the season playing by far their best defense of the year. And when it comes to this Nebraska offense, I mean, week 13 against Wisconsin, they went absolutely nuclear. 44 points, over 6.6 yards per play, over 55% success rate. I don't know what to do with that data, because in the 5 games before that, or maybe the 6 games before that, week 6 through 12, they were averaging 15.6 points per game, just 4.25 yards per play. Success rate under 38%. It feels a lot like guessing, trying to predict what type of offensive performance we're going to see out of Dylan Raiola in this Nebraska offense. I will say they're missing their RB1, so they're not at full strength. They're also missing, I want to say, a guard, so they're not at full strength here in Nebraska. Personally, I've been saying it for most of the second half of the season. I don't really trust the Nebraska offense. Raiola is clearly talented. So I guess I lean towards Boston College in this one at +4. I really don't know, though. Again, probably just doing some gambling here. Give me Boston College +4 next game. Next up, we got the Cajuns against TCU in the New Mexico Bowl. See the line for this one. Was it at 12? Was that 12 before? Oh, 10.5. Okay. TCU laying 10.5. Total sitting at 58.5, 59. Let's take a look at the pie charts. And according to the data, actions coming in on the TCU side here. Over 55% of the tickets, over 60% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this game, mostly because we don't really know who's playing. We don't know if Wooldridge, the quarterback, is going to play for Louisiana. I think the backup, Chandler Rogers, is also hurt. Or Chandler Rogers is also hurt. So what we could get from Louisiana at quarterback is either Wooldridge, who might be the best quarterback in the conference, or a redshirt freshman with very little experience. So kind of tough to make a prediction without knowing who's playing quarterback for Louisiana. On the TCU side, they are missing a few receivers. Personally, I mean, I think this matchup just points heavily towards an over. Bowl games tend to go over as well, so I would probably just look over here. TCU should be able to throw the ball on Louisiana, who has a terrible defense. Louisiana can definitely score. If Wooldridge plays, I would just take the over. I don't care what the number is. If he doesn't play, I'd maybe go with a TCU team total over. Problem is, it's going to be super high. So, I mean, I don't have a ton of interest in this game. Let's say over or pass next game. Iowa State against Miami in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. This game's being played in Camping World Stadium. Iowa State, Miami in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Miami's laying 4.5 points in this one, total sitting at 56.5 or 57. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in pretty heavily on the Miami side. Over 75% of the tickets, over 80% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Iowa State offense against the Miami defense. On paper, Miami's got some better looking numbers on the year. Defensively, they have played a bit of an easier schedule, which is why if you look at the FEI ratings, Iowa State offensively is 29th, Miami's defense 51st. So on paper, Iowa State should have the slight edge on this side of the ball. That being said, they are going to be missing pieces here, including their number 1 and number 2 wide receivers. They're also going to be without their center. And the reason that's so significant, number 1, this is an offense that likes to throw the ball. Number 2, look at the receiving production for Iowa State this year. Higgins, 1183. Noel, over 1,000. The next closest is 242. So these two receivers that are missing for Iowa State account for such a huge part of their receiving yards. I mean, no one else has above 250. So missing them is huge. I don't know if we can trust this Iowa State passing attack without those two guys. And look, I know when it comes to the Miami defense, everyone just assumes it's terrible. We've seen them play at a lot of shootouts this year. We all remember the Syracuse game. Kyle McCord went off. They gave up 380 yards through the air, 10.6 yards per attempt, 61% success rate per drop back. But actually in the 5 games before that, Miami was playing some solid defense against the pass. Just 6.04 yards per pass attempt allowed, 196 passing yards allowed per game. Success rate is under 38%. And you got some solid offenses in there. Louisville, Florida State, no. Duke, Malik Murphy can throw it. Georgia Tech, Wake. I mean, it's not like they played complete scrubs. So this Miami defense isn't as bad as perceived. I'll say that. So missing those 2 wide receivers, I don't know how much production through the air we can expect to see from this Iowa State offense. And it's not like they're going to have run support. I mean, this team hasn't been able to run the ball in a while. In their last 6 games, they're averaging 3.83 yards per carry, success rate per rush under 37%. This is not a great rushing attack either. So I don't really like the matchup for Iowa State offensively. On the other side, we got the Miami Hurricanes offense, and obviously, as I'm sure you know, this is an offense that loves to throw the ball. They love to score a lot of points and move at a fast pace. 21st in passing frequency, 28th in pace. On paper, this should be a tough matchup. Iowa State's been strong against the pass all year. 28th in yards per pass attempt allowed, 47th in success rate per dropback, 13th in effective pass. So on paper, this should be a tough matchup for Miami offensively. That being said, the Iowa State pass defense has been trending in the wrong direction. Through the first 8 games, they were looking like one of the best pass defenses in the country, allowing under 4.8 yards per pass attempt, under 35% success rate per dropback. But in 4 of their last 5 games, they were actually struggling to defend the pass. The Kansas, Utah, Kansas State, and Arizona State games, they allowed over 9.9 yards per pass attempt, 42.5% success rate per dropback, just over 215 passing yards per game. So it's not that they got completely lit up, but those efficiency numbers, I mean, you can't even compare them to how they look through the first 8 games of the year. Now, I know you might be thinking, Kyle, who cares? Who's even playing for the Miami offense? And I mean, it's a good question. I doubt Cam Ward's going to play. I doubt Restrepo's going to play. Also, I think another one of their receivers, Horton, I don't think he's going to play either. I'm pretty sure he's in the transfer portal. Their tight end, also not going to play. I think they're going to be missing an offensive tackle as well. A lot of key pieces to a passing attack missing in this one. So how can we trust the Miami offense without all those pieces? Again, it's a good question. I mean, we did see Emory Williams, who, by the way, is going to be the quarterback in this game, or we think it's going to be the quarterback. He came in the Ball State game, and he was slinging it. 11 of 12, 161 yards, a touchdown, 231.9 passer rating. Yes, I know it's Ball State, but he showed us something in that game. He was slinging it, and by the way, the Iowa State defense is missing pieces as well, including 2 of their top 3 corners, an edge rusher, and they've got a safety that got injured in week 12 or 13. So they're missing a safety as well. 3 of their top 5 DBs out for this game. I think Miami's passing attack is going to be fine. Even missing the pieces, I think they're going to be able to throw the ball on an Iowa State defense that's been trending in the wrong direction. So where does that leave me in terms of placing a bet? Well, I lean towards the Miami side, but missing all the pieces, it's tough to lay a number like 4.5. So I think the best way to go would just be take the over. And I know you're thinking, how can you take the over? You just said you don't even like the matchup for Iowa State offensively, which is true. But these Miami games are so fast-paced, and there's so many possessions that I think by default it should get up and over 57. I don't know if I actually bet this one, but it'll be over 57 or pass for me. Next game, Miami of Ohio against Colorado State. We got the Red Hawks against the Rams here in the Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl. The Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl. Colorado State catching 2.5 points here. Total sitting down at 40.5. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in on the Colorado State side. Over 60% of the money, over 75% of the tickets. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's start with the Miami of Ohio offense, and as I'm sure you know, this is an offense that wants to throw the ball with Gabbert. They're 37th in pass frequency, and on paper, this should be a pretty favorable matchup for them. Colorado State's defense has struggled to get off the field when their opponent drops back to pass. 108th in success rate per dropback, 85th in effective pass. So on paper, Miami of Ohio should be able to throw the ball on this defense. Here's the problem. They're missing wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, left tackle, and right tackle. If you ask me, Kyle, what are the most important pieces to an offense when it comes to a passing attack? I would say the quarterback, the left tackle and the right tackle, and the wide receivers. They're missing everybody except the quarterback. Only Gabbert's going to be out there. And by the way, this is a Colorado State team that was actually playing some really nice looking defense against the pass down the stretch. In their last 3 games, they were allowing just 5.67 yards per pass attempt, success rate per dropback under 40%. And I know Wyoming's in there. That offense is terrible. But Fresno State with Mikey Keene, Utah State can throw the ball a little bit. 2 of those 3 games were against offenses that can throw the ball. So this Colorado State defense was actually playing pretty well against the pass down the stretch. Now, we do have to mention that the Colorado State defense is missing pieces as well, an edge rusher and a linebacker. Also, the DC is gone. Freddie Banks, he got fired, so he will not be. They have an interim defensive coordinator for this game. I'm not sure if that moves the needle. I'm really not too familiar with Freddie Banks. But as a whole, missing all those receivers with an offense that wants to throw the ball, Miami of Ohio, not the best rushing attack. I think they might struggle to move the ball a little bit in this one. But then we flip it over to the other side and look at the matchup for Colorado State's offense, and this is where the value shifts all the way back over to the Miami of Ohio side. Miami of Ohio, obviously great defense, probably the best defense in the MAC. Colorado State's been struggling this year offensively. They've been a run-first team. Run game's been there at times, but as a whole, it's been pretty inconsistent. This offense as a whole is sitting at 104th in OFEI, and in their last 2 games, they weren't able to run the ball at all. Just 3.4 yards per carry, success rate per rush under 34%, just 102 rushing yards per game, and this is an offense that's trying to run the ball. So those are not good numbers there. And Utah State's defense is terrible, by the way. Fresno, okay. Fresno's a decent defense. Utah State's defense is terrible. I very seriously doubt they're going to be able to run the ball in this Miami of Ohio defense. That's a very tough defensive front. Now, the Redhawks are missing their top 2 corners. So maybe you're thinking, hey, Colorado State can throw the ball in this game. They're missing both their top corners. Here's the thing. Colorado State's going to be without their top 2 receivers. I mean, Horton got hurt earlier in the year, and the other guy, I forget his name, Caleb something, I think, he opted out. He's not there. He's in the transfer portal. So they're missing their top 2 receivers. So, I mean, there's nothing about the Colorado State offense I like here. This is an offense that wants to run the ball. They've been struggling to do so. Probably won't be able to run the ball in Miami of Ohio. If they try to throw it, they're missing their top 2 receivers. Just not much to like about the Colorado State offense here, which is why when it comes to betting this game, I have to lean towards the Miami of Ohio side, but really not trying to lay 2.5. They're missing all their receivers. They're a passing offense. Really don't like it at all. I mean, I guess maybe an under, but I'm not taking an under 40.5 in a bowl game. I mean, that's just crazy, especially when I expect Miami of Ohio to try to throw it. So, I mean, maybe a Colorado State team total under or Miami of Ohio minus 2.5. I don't have a bet on this game, but I'd look somewhere in that direction. Next, East Carolina, NC State in the Military Bowl. So we got ECU, NC State, Military Bowl. NC State now laying pretty much 7 across the board. I do see a 7.5 out there. Total sitting at 59.5 or 60, depending on your sports book. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, tickets coming in slightly on the NC State side, just over 60%. Money's about 50-50. So let's get into this matchup briefly, and we're talking about the NC State offense. So we're talking about CJ Bailey. This kid's tough not to root for, man. If you've watched him play, he's a playmaker, and I think he's going to be a great quarterback next year for him. This North Carolina State offense definitely found some life down the stretch with him at quarterback. On the season, they're 55th in yards per play, 49th in success rate. ECU does have some solid defensive numbers on the full season, 65th in yards per play and 30th in success rate. The problem is, and you probably already know this if you subscribe to this channel, I just don't trust this ECU defense away from home. At home, I'm down to put some faith in ECU on the defensive side of the ball, not away. Now, this obviously isn't a true road game for ECU. It's a neutral site, but this NC State offense is going to be tough to stop. In their last 6 games, and they saw some tough opponents in there, by the way. In their last 6 games, they're averaging 30.5 points per game, over 6.6 yards per play. They're just scoring on everybody they see. And look at ECU in their last 4 games away from home. They're allowing 39.8. That's not a typo. 39.8 points allowed per game, 6.2 yards per play. So how do we not like CJ Bailey to just go off here against this defense? And if you're thinking, well, Kyle, maybe NC State's missing some pieces on the offensive side. Maybe there's some opt-outs. Not at all. In fact, the only player that's not playing in this game is, I wrote star wide receiver in this graphic, Concepcion, because he is their star wide receiver, but he really hasn't been very involved in the offense. In fact, that's probably why he's transferring. His little brother was supposed to come to NC State as well. He decommitted, so he just wasn't getting the ball much this year. He's leaving, and his little brother is going somewhere else as well. So Concepcion not playing really doesn't move the needle for me because he really hasn't been very involved in the offense. And as far as the ECU defense goes, they are missing pieces. They're missing a corner, and remember, they're already down a corner. They lost their best corner earlier in the season, so technically they're missing 2 corners and a linebacker. So ECU's defense is actually more shorthanded than NC State's offense is. I don't know how we can count on East Carolina defensively to make any stops. NC State should be able to put up a big number in this game. Now, the other side of the ball is a little bit tricky because both of these units have been very unpredictable. We've seen this NC State defense look really good at times, and there's been other times where it looks absolutely terrible. On the season, they're 76th in yards per play, 50th in success rate, and what I just said, copy and paste that over to the ECU offense because you could say the same exact thing. This offense, in a few games when they made the quarterback switch over to Hauser, looked electric. And then there were other times where it looked absolutely terrible. So the range of production we can get from both of these units is just huge. So I really don't know what to expect. 2 of the top 3 wide receivers are out for ECU, so I do think it's possible that NC State could put out a pretty solid defensive performance. They're pretty much going to be at full strength on the defensive side of the ball, but if I'm being honest, I think this side of the ball is a little more of a wild card. So when it comes to betting this game, I like NC State to score points. Whether or not ECU is able to keep up, it's a toss-up, so I'm going to go NC State -7 or NC State team total over. I'm going to bet one of those. I'll let you know on the live show what I end up doing. As of right now, I haven't placed a bet, but it'll be NC State -7 or NC State team total over.
So I'm going to cut it off there. There are 2 games left. I mean, if everyone plays for Colorado, I don't see any reason not to lay the 3. The problem is we don't know, like Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, the other receiver. We don't know who's going to play. From what I'm reading, it sounds like they're going to play, but I really don't know. So it would only be Colorado there, but I'm waiting to see who plays. And in the last game, I think I might just take the 14.5 completely gambling on La Tech. I shouldn't. Army should boat race them. But I think I would lean towards La Tech. I'm not going to... You know what? I actually might lean towards Army. We'll talk about that one on the live show. Actually, I haven't really looked at that one. So, yeah, live show, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. We got college basketball. We got 8 bowl games. We got 3 NFL games. We got a loaded Saturday, so if you're able to make it, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, would love to see you in the comments. Let's have ourselves a good one. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me for anything. Later.